State Board of Elections on Thursday, February 22nd will come to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairwoman Johnson,
Present.
Vice Chairman Rhode, Member Bettenker, Member Connors,
Present.
Member Giacone,
Present.
Member Maderas, Member Scholl,
Present.
Deputy Director Miguel Nunez,
Present.
Legal Counsel Ray Macarcio. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Agenda item number 1, the board may discuss and vote to ratify Chairwoman Jennifer Johnson's selection of board member Michael Connors to serve on the legislative subcommittee. And I can just say a little bit about this. I spoke to our legal counsel last week and had asked if I could appoint Commissioner Connors to be on the legislative subcommittee without a vote proactively. He said yes, that we could, and that we should vote to ratify it at the next meeting. So I guess I can make that. Or do you want to?
Oh, yeah, I'll make a motion to ratify the selection of board member Connors to serve on the legislative subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and
Congratulations.
second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of Michael Connor serving on the legislative subcommittee, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Congratulations to you, sir. Agenda item number 2, the board may discuss and vote upon the recommendation from the subcommittee on the proposed legislation regarding drop boxes. And let the record show that Commissioner Bettenker has joined us at 3:06 p.m. Welcome. So I guess I can,
I can take it from here.
you want to take it?
Yeah.
Please.
Happy to. That was great timing. Sorry about that. So on Tuesday, right? Yes, the subcommittee met, and we have several recommendations. I do know that one of the pieces, yes,
Oh, it
one
is.
of the pieces of legislation is in the agenda, however, correct? So we won't go over that one specifically. So there are 25 legislative bills that were reviewed by for recommendation to support, opposed, or to have no position by the committee. And here is the breakdown. So
Can
go
I
ahead,
stop
please do.
for 1 second? So, we're going to hear first, the recommendation on just the
On the
Dropbox
subcommittee.
legislation,
I'm
then
so
we'll
sorry.
move. No,
Thank
no,
you
that's
so
fine.
much.
It confused me.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. And so I'm happy to either share how the subcommittee voted for that, and then maybe opening it up to Miguel to talk more about it. Is that okay?
That's great.
Perfect. So and I invite Commissioner Connors to talk more, to add anything on that I may be missing. But the subcommittee voted to, at that time, to not support. Yes, right? Please hold. Yes. To oppose, we voted to oppose this specific legislation based on some of the conversations and feedback that was discussed at the subcommittee. But I don't know if Miguel has anything he'd like to add for more context.
So the subcommittee had a discussion after I gave a similar presentation to what I had given on January 23rd, when I had originally presented this legislation to the board. The board referred it to the subcommittee, and the subcommittee continued that discussion. I presented the options, the alternatives. I think we have those slides here. So the timeline, if you want to see put the timeline up that we have, where with the legislation would have to be submitted with the solution to a problem that would occur if an election, a special election, were to be heard in the month immediately preceding a statewide, either presidential preference primary, statewide primary, or a general election. And as you can see, as an example here, if with the statewide primary on September 10th, the legislation, if enacted with the current 30 days that's in there in the draft, would potentially be required to be opened on the morning of August 6th for the September 10th primary. However, if we were to have a special election in that month of August, the state law would also require the drop box to be locked at 8 p.m. for any of those special election ballots. So if there was a city council election or a school committee special election, or for General Assembly, for example, technically, usually, and according to the law today, the local boards of canvassers would need to lock that box to ensure no additional ballots go in at 8 p.m. for that special election. And they would transport those to us either that night or the following day. So this, under this, there's a conflict here because under this draft, in these sort of examples where that 35 days overlaps with a special election, the local board would have to actually, by law, be required to open the drop box 35 days before the upcoming statewide election. But at the same time, they would be required to lock the box at 8 p.m. for their special election. So we've come up with a few solutions in order to potentially mitigate most of these issues. For example, one option is to amend the legislation, the draft, to remove the requirement that the drop boxes be locked at 8 p.m. And allow the board to sign an affidavit attesting that the ballots were removed at 8 p.m. on election night. The second potential solution that the board can entertain is also to continue to require that the drop boxes be locked at 8 p.m. on election night for those special elections, but then require that the local board reopen it the following morning to continue accepting ballots for the upcoming statewide election in the next month. And a third solution would be to prohibit the scheduling of special elections in the month preceding a biennial statewide election or a presidential preference primary. That would remove the conflict, because if you're not scheduling an election the month before, then you wouldn't have that conflict. The question came up at the last meeting that would perhaps give less flexibility. Would that give less flexibility to the board? And it would, because if you remove those months of August and October, which typically are before a statewide election, you would remove some of that flexibility for them to fill any vacancies. And then the fourth option is, of course, to either reduce the 35 days to another number, or to continue with the current 20-day drop box availability requirement, which is what's currently in the law and what is followed.
And so if I can add some more context, and then I'll open it to Commissioner Connors, if that's okay for more context. So in the Legislative Committee, there's 3 of us, and Member Connors and Vice Chair voted to oppose it. Yes, they've had a motion to oppose it. I was against the motion, so I just want to give him time to share why. But we did have the opportunity to hear from the Secretary of State's office and from the local board of canvassers, both of whom support this the changes to the 35 days. And when Miguel talked about the potential solutions, they preferred number 1. So just wanted to give that context as well. For it, but so I'll open it to Member Connors.
Excuse me, what bill number is that?
Miguel, what's the?
There is no, it has not been
Yeah, because it
submitted,
has not been submitted, so it's
but the
just,
copy of the draft should be in your packet there.
It's number 2.
So just to reiterate my position on it, we have a proposal that seemed to cause conflicts, and there was no clear consensus as to how many days really it should be extended. There was 35 days, there was 32 days, 30 days. And just, for the conflicts that it could potentially cause. And we talked about the impetus for this, and I think it was brought up that some of the clerks wanted it so they could receive voter registration cards and ballots at the same time. At least 2/3 of the subcommittee felt like that wasn't a great reason to extend the ballot boxes being open. My feeling was if the boxes are open 20 days, which runs concurrent with early voting, I'm very satisfied with that. I think it's clean and it prevents mixing of ballots and potential issues. So that's why I voted against that at the subcommittee.
Just wanted to give you context. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you both. And I have just a couple additional questions for Miguel or potentially others before I open it up to the other members. The in looking at it, so Miguel, voters could receive, because given what Commissioner Connor said, the equal of the 20 days of early voting, they could receive their mail ballot around the 26th, 27th day before the election. Is that correct?
Correct. So I believe the Secretary of State aims to send out any ballots that they received applications for at the 30-day mark.
Right.
That could be 28 days, 29 days occasionally, but that's
Okay.
their target. And with the mail, it probably take about a few days to get to the voter. So I would
Okay.
say that's accurate.
Okay, and I want to ask these questions, but to be very clear, I push for this legislation to be drafted, so I do believe in it and support it, but I do want to have a constructive discussion to get to where, the board wishes to go. And so for me, for that, it's, voters could have their ballot for, up to 10 days at the most without being able to deposit it. So for me, having access to that Dropbox would be important. And then they are, Miguel, all of the drop boxes currently are secure and monitored by surveillance outside of the locking and unlocking of them. When they are open, they are secured that way, right?
That is correct. They are monitored and they're locked, but they are accessible during that period for voters to drop their ballots in.
Okay. And I guess, and this would be a question for, I guess, a member of the subcommittee, because I did not get to watch it, but in looking at the fact that the Clerks Association did vote to support this bill, and outside of, the ability, which I am supportive of, voters dropping in, their applications or whatnot, but was there a general consensus? And I think you might have heard from Mr. Lima, but would you be able to summarize for me?
Specifically as
Yeah.
to the voter,
Why the Clerks Association is in support of.
yeah, I
this.
believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, to add on, I think part of the timing, which was explained also by the representative from the Secretary of State's office, was around being able to have more time because voters do get their mail ballots a lot earlier in, and because they did not seem to share any issues with potentially having a couple of voter registrations in if they were submitted. But if that wasn't enough, happy to have either one. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. So yeah, we typically, our mail ballots are sent out between 28 and 30 days. So it does take a couple of days for the voters to receive their ballots, but then during that time, they don't have time to deposit there, or there's not a Dropbox available for them to deposit their mailbox. So now they're either holding on to it or putting it in the mail. And voters love to use the Dropbox. And then I just want to state that it's not just with voter registration. I think that there's the misconception that local boards want it for voter registration as well, for the last day to register to vote. But they do have to have a location where applications are also available. So it's not just so that people can drop off their registrations, but it's another form for people to be able to have that ability to drop off their voter registrations or any forms that they need for the board of canvassers.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Nick Lehman from the chair of the Elections Committee for the Town Clerks Association, also registrar for the Grants Board of Canvassers. So for us, I mean, the voter registration deadline piece is a tertiary benefit, right? It's not the driving factor behind the local election association officials' support for this. As it is right now, under the law, you have a lot of towns that actually will put a cardboard box at their police station front desk, or some kind of box or container at a front counter at some public building that's going to be open on a Sunday and the registration deadline day. That's the current practice that's going on. We have these state-supplied lockable, official looking and presentable boxes at every city and town in the state, which are sitting there locked and not being utilized. So on that registration piece, that again, that's just a small part of it, but the real part of this is for the voters, right? Under the current law, those boxes are locked until 20 days prior to an election. Now, either option one or even option two could work well here, because those could work regardless of the election calendar, regardless of if there's another election ongoing within that 35-day period. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Voters do get their ballots well before that 20-day period. Right now, we're in the presidential preference primary. Our drop boxes are not going to be open for another 2 weeks. I have voters in Cranston now who have, in some cases, already received their mail ballot or going to receive it in the mail today. That voter will show up at City Hall at 4:35 today. If they have that mail ballot in hand, they will have nowhere to deposit it because we do not have not only the drop box is locked, we don't have a 24-hour mail slot at City Hall. Some cities and towns do. And as I testified on Tuesday for the subcommittee, that's an issue because while we have these state-provided, tightly regulated, secured, bolted-down drop boxes in all 39 cities and towns under 24-hour surveillance that are controlled by state law, that are controlled by the Board of Elections, that is not the case for the municipal drop boxes or the municipal 24-hour mail slots that nothing in statute that I'm aware of prevents a voter from also inserting their sealed mail ballot into and being received by a city or town hall. Similarly, already, if a voter comes in during business hours and they see the drop box is locked outside, and Commissioner Jack Boney, remember, we got a lot of complaints about that from voters in 2022. They had to come in our office during business hours because the drop box was locked and they had mail ballots in hand. Currently, the voter already can come into our office and hand their ballot to us over the counter. And we're still processing those ballots and putting them in a vault or secure storage. We're still tracking them and logging them in. That's already happening now. But we have a box that's sitting out there locked that could just as easily be used, just as easily be convenient for the voters and be accessible after hours. So those voters, one of whom I actually know personally, she's one of my poll workers, but she's traveling, she's going away, which is why she got her mail ballot sent out early, who could benefit from maybe getting out of work at 5 o'clock, stopping by City Hall, dropping off that ballot to make sure it's delivered and received. She can't do that under the existing law, which is why, on behalf of the voters, the local clerks are so supportive of this, because it really would make a difference, for those cases. We're not going to be getting thousands upon thousands of ballots in that period because typically they're not even mailed out until 27 days, en masse, or 26 days. So it really is just covering that gap. And I understand the counter argument. I certainly understand the rationale of it lining up with the early voting period, but really it's a separate process. It's a different process. And it's a process that really begins months prior to the election when mail ballot applications first go out. And in the case of military overseas ballots or soldiers overseas, FPCAs, those are sent out 45 days prior to an election. And they could be received as early as 45 days, 44 days prior to an election, if not earlier. So you already have people receiving ballots. It's just a question of, do they have a secure, tightly regulated way to deposit them? Or, absent a change to the law, we will continue to have the system that we have now, where in the absence of that drop box, voters will continue to use a 24-hour mail slot or something like that in a municipality that is not as secure, may not even be under video surveillance.
Thank you. Thank you both. And before I just open it up for questions, if you could just stay for a moment. And one more comment and a question, just want to be clear. I mean, I am not circumventing or any other board members' opinions or beliefs on this at all. I think this is a good constructive conversation and want to point out that all of this is new coming out of the pandemic and the executive orders and what we were able to codify into law. So I really do believe that we're learning through this together. And so wrestling with these issues are important on behalf of the voters. So just to state that for the record. But I guess one final question from me in looking at the options. So if we reduce the 30, can't find my words, the 35 days to say 32 or 30 days, would that alleviate the whole issue of conflicting with a special election? And then given the security and everything else we have in place for the drop boxes, if we put that aside, it would sort of be business as usual for the drop boxes, right? But just voters would have a longer period of time. Am I missing something, Miguel? Or is that?
You're correct in all but one instance, and that would be in the presidential preference primary. So for example, the next presidential preference primary would be held on April 25th, 2028. And the potentially, if there was a special election scheduled for April 4th, the first Tuesday of 2028, then that would be 21 days before the presidential preference primary. So any number of days there that's above the 21 days would generate a conflict in 2028 with the PPP. So essentially, if Woonsocket, for example, were holding a special election on April 4th of 2028, hypothetically, they would need to, they would have a conflict where one law would be telling them, for your special election, you have to open the box you have to lock the box at 8 o'clock, but by the same token, that day they would have to open it for that morning for the presidential preference primary. But that's the only instance where there would be a potential conflict. The other two, the first and the second option, don't have that conflict because obviously you're not locking it. If you're locking it but reopening it, it's not going to impact the presidential preference primary, which would be a few weeks later.
Was that going to be your question?
I was gonna say that. Thank you. I was just gonna ask that. So, like, could we even do a mix of it? Say we would like option 3 of prohibiting a special election, but then you answered it. Either 1 or 2 could actually alleviate that.
Correct.
Okay.
Before I open it up more broadly, does anyone on the board have any other questions for Mr. Lima or Ms. Placencia?
I have one.
Yes.
Okay. We have 4 positions here. So my question is this. Of the 4, which one would give the greatest faith and confidence to the voters that their mail ballots will be properly handled?
I think either 1 or 2. I mean, it's not causing, it's not adding another task to the boards of canvassers. It's, they still have to check the drop box at 8 p.m. If they were to sign a form saying, an affidavit saying that there were no ballots there after 8 o'clock and then reopening the drop box at 8:30 the next morning, it's just that time period when that drop box is closed. If they were just depositing an affidavit, still opening up the drop box, you still have to have 2 pairs of supervisors or election officials to go out there. They're still, once those ballots are retrieved at the end of the night, they're still going to be locked up at the Board of Canvassers. So there's still security measures in place even after retrieving those ballots from the drop boxes. But it's not causing a hardship for the Board of Canvassers to to fill out an affidavit and leaving it in the drop box for 1 or 2.
So Nick, what is the position of the Clerks Association with respect to providing the greatest faith and confidence in the handling of the mail ballots?
I can speak for myself as the
Yes.
chair of the elections committee and also representing the Cranston Board of Canvassers, which also independently voted to support this. I agree completely with what Kathy just said. Number 1 or number 2 would work, and I think number 1 in particular works well because inserting that affidavit, you're adding an additional item of chain of custody in there to verify and have it documented that yes, the law was followed. I think that's helpful. And that's helpful for just explaining the procedure if anybody had any questions about it. But like I said, the fact of the matter is, regardless of whether or not that drop box is open or closed, if there are 2 elections going on concurrently, we're going to be receiving mail ballots in the mail over our front counter and via other means, regardless of whether the drop box is being utilized. So, you know, if we're going to do that, which is going to happen, we already know that's happening now. You know, there's a one socket, you know, special election cycle going on in concurrent with the presidential primary. And there are 2 different types of mail ballots in circulation at the same time. It's already happening. So, you know, all this does is put it in a good solid mechanism to make sure that it happens more securely than it is presently.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any other? Did you?
Yeah, I do have a question. Just to clarify, if the ballots are sent out 30 days beforehand, why 35 days? I guess I'm confused about that.
I
So there's
can
5
answer that.
days when it's open and not.
So the 30 days was changed because if that would make it fall on a Sunday, which would require our local boards of canvassers to go in, pay someone overtime to unlock the drop box on a Sunday, which would be the 30 days. So the compromise, the Secretary of State's office said, we work with them and the suggestion was for 35 days, which would lead to it falling on the week before, a few days before the weekend. And that was the date that was put in the draft. That was actually what was put in the draft that was submitted to the General Assembly last year. It was originally 30 days and it was up to 35 days in a subsequent change that the board voted to approve.
So is it fair to say that there's a period of time where it'll be open, but no one actually has a mail ballot in hand to deposit in there?
That is possible at the 35 days, correct?
Okay. Mr. Lino, looks like you've got a comment to add.
I mean, for a statewide or federal election, like I said, the military overseas ballots by federal law are going out 45 days ahead of the election. So those ballots are already submitted out to those voters. And there are, like I said, some voters who may be in special circumstances because they're going on vacation or something, or they're going to be out of the country themselves in that 3-week period. And in those cases, you know, if the ballot is ready and available, the Secretary of State's office can mail that ballot out to the voter and has and does. So there are circumstances where some voters may receive those ballots early. It's not a ton of them. You know, we can probably count them all on one hand, the number that actually would be received, but you know, it is feasible.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. So I would just I don't have any more questions. Just a couple of comments. One, thank you for clarifying with the registration cards, because we're watching the video. It made it seem like that was the crux of the issue, but now I understand that a little bit better. My comment would be, especially when it's such a small number, as Mr. Lima just pointed out, from 35 to 30 days, I just think that I have what I think is a legitimate security concern here, because even in Cranston, when there was a problem with that box, it's not constantly monitored. So I don't want anyone to get a false sense of security so it wasn't a proactive, it was an after the event that they had to review the videotape and then they had to take action. So there's a potential that there could be ballots in there and something could happen to that. And then I just think that causes an immense, could be very confusing for people. They could say they voted, they didn't vote. Like, it's just, I think we're opening up a potential can of worms here. And if we, as Commissioner Scholes points out, we're very concerned about the integrity and giving people a positive sense of the integrity of the election. I think that we're going in the wrong direction with doing something like this. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, one more question. Thank you.
Sure.
Kathy, when the mail ballots are sent out, and there are 2 elections, I assume that's 1 ballot per envelope. Would that be right? Right, so if the voter put the 2 ballots in the same envelope, what would happen?
I can answer that. We would,
We don't receive the ballot.
Yeah, okay.
we would void that.
Okay.
We would not accept the ballot with.
Either one. All right. My question is, would it make sense if there's an overlap to have the mail ballots color-coded envelopes? So one color would be for candidate in one election, another color for a separate election. So that way, whoever's collecting the ballots will know what election these ballots are for.
I mean, that would be more of a monetary concern if the cost associated with the color, with having different colors. And then would it be a different color for every special election? And so,
No, just on the overlaps. I mean, it could be a stripe, anything to differentiate the envelopes for each election.
Just the outside.
Just the outside envelopes
I mean,
for the
that's
special
something-
elections, if there's an overlap.
Yeah, so that's something we can definitely look into.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to?
No, I appreciate the sort of the feedback and the concerns. I actually think that, thanks to Member Scholl's question about, which one would provide more like trust in it. I actually appreciated hearing that number one or two. I think, and just what you said, what they also mentioned is this doesn't add another task to the local board of canvassers, which I know that sometimes that is part of what the board's concern becomes. So I think that is actually yet another positive aspect. I do understand, like, the 5-day gap, the possible 5-day gap can be, hard, something that wouldn't work out. But I do remember, Miguel, you mentioned maybe 32 days, right? So I'm wondering if there is a middle or a sweet spot to something like this. That's just a question for the rest of you.
Anyone want to respond to that before I? Commissioner Connors.
At the risk of repeating myself, this is precisely the reason why I can't support it. There's still no clear, concise answer. How many days? As Miguel said, anything over 21 days potentially presents a conflict between a special election. So that's why, again, I can't support it.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, that would be for option 4. Any number above 21 days would impact 2028. That doesn't, anything between 21 and 35 would conflict with the presidential preference primary in 2028, but options 1 and 2 would not impact that.
In fact, you said that option 1 and 2 can actually fix that issue, correct?
Correct.
Great. So we already have a solution to a potential problem if we have two elections.
I would just ask Miguel if, hearing the different concerns, the different, voices of in favor and, opposed and concerned, is there anything else you think we should know or understand better before, I open to make a motion, or we?
Well, I mean, with anything, we would do what the board asks us to do. We would find the solution to it. If it is extended, I will say that we will, of course, extend the Dropbox couriers by that, whatever that time frame is. So currently it's 20 days. We would hire them a week and a half earlier or so, depending on the number of days that is agreed upon. And they would just go out earlier. And also, from a technological standpoint, the cameras that we have out there, we would need to make some adjustments to them so that they can actually store the entire time frame. They're set up for the 20 days, so there would be some adjustment to that with our vendor to get that footage recorded for that entire period. Right now, we're set up for 20 days. If this were to be enacted, then we would find the solution to get that extended to the 30 or whatever number of days it would be required.
Thank you. Anything additional from the board?
I'm sorry, just a quick clarification. When you say store, so is the video only stored on the camera itself and not monitored from a is there a possibility someone could monitor it from a remote location?
It's monitored from within the facility that it's attached to. So it would be in the town hall, for example.
Okay.
That's where it's monitored. That's where it's stored.
Got it. Thank you.
Just one final comment for me, and then I'll open it up to see if anyone on the board wishes to make a motion. I want, as a voting board member, I'm comfortable with the solutions. I appreciate the staff. I appreciate our partners at the Secretary's office and the cities and towns for, trying to get to that solution. And if, when it comes down to it and we don't move this forward, I think, one of my many, concerns would be that, we're not going to learn that this will work if we keep it as is, but we can look to next year. But again, just want to thank everyone who's, worked towards a solution, everyone who's wrestling with this issue, whether, in support or opposition. Definitely appreciate the fact that we're going through this process. So, and with that, I will open it up to any board member that wishes to make a motion. And wait, one clarifying question. So the subcommittee, we are voting to, where's my
We would
agenda?
either, the
Yeah.
motion would either be to, it would be to either support, sorry, see, this happens.
Bless you.
To vote with what the subcommittee,
Support the
correct.
recommendation of the subcommittee or oppose it. Sorry, I saw
Correct,
you
that's
were
fine.
struggling with your. Okay. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to support the recommendation of the subcommittee regarding the legislation for the drop boxes.
I'll second that motion.
Should you say to support? Sorry, we don't have
Support the
legal counsel
Yeah,
here.
To support the recommendation
recommendation
of the
to-
subcommittee, which was
To
to,
oppose.
to oppose it. yes.
Okay, thank
there's a
you.
lot of supports and opposed.
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further
I
discussion?
just want to clarify, you talked about opposing the proposed amendment. That is number 2 on our agenda. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So it would be,
And this is the one that Miguel prepared?
correct. So it would, it's not a bill just yet.
Yeah, but this was the staff. prepared.
Legislation,
Correct.
yes.
Okay, right, okay.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Well, my feeling is that
Yes, sir.
they came up with a good compromise, is that? I
Mhm.
mean, so, I mean, I would support their position, this bill.
You would support the position,
I would support the bill as presented, or the proposed bill as presented by the staff.
So can I recommend then, Commissioner Scholl's, the motion and second on the table right now is to support the recommendation to oppose these changes. So could we should probably take that vote
so you would
and
need a
then,
motion.
So my position would vote no.
yeah, you would vote no.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great,
Yes, right.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. So the noes have it.
The noes have it. So do we have a motion to support? This would take us, thank you.
Sorry,
This would,
thank
that's
you.
okay. That's a lot of opposing and supporting.
I'm trying.
So this to Commissioner Scholl's. So now do we have a motion to support the piece of legislation for mail ballots?
Yes, as presented by the staff, correct,
Great.
yes.
Do you want to make a motion?
I make that motion.
And I will second that motion. Drop
Can you
boxes,
just
mail-
repeat that?
sorry.
Yeah, can you repeat the?
So Mr. Scholes will make a motion.
Okay, I move that we support the staff's recommendation as drafted and as presented to the board, laying out the solution, which is option number 2 of potential solutions with respect to locking drop boxes where there's an overlap of elections.
And I will
Thank you.
second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Question.
Yes, sir.
So the motion is to support this as written, and this includes option
Number
2?
Yes.
Correct. That's
The
the
option
bottom.
2.
Is that?
Yes, it is.
Well, I
a
just want to clarify, the affidavit is not mentioned in option 2, so would the board, if for option 2, adding an affidavit to that, would that be something that would be included? Because the staff would have to amend this legislation.
I think it's a good idea.
Especially because the
Include
board, the local
affidavits.
board mentioned that it would be an added security.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you want to knock this over for another meeting and perhaps staff can present?
Ooh,
No, because we need
Would
to
we-
do that as soon as
Sorry.
possible.
Oh,
No, we would
oh, we
need
need
to
it.
do it.
We
Yeah,
need
yeah.
to do it. We need
Yeah.
to do it now.
But
Okay.
do it.
would, yeah, so, but I mean, if we could, the
could just
motion
make
would
the
be to
amended
support with that
with that change.
additional and then it wouldn't, I,
Correct.
again, don't have counsel here, but we wouldn't have to bring it back
Correct.
before us because we're,
Against.
There is a deadline upcoming for this, to submit this to the General Assembly, and
Yeah.
that would be prior to the next scheduled meeting, which is March 5th.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, so if we could, the motion would be in addition to the amendment with an affidavit.
correct. Okay. Okay, we have a motion, and did I hear you second, Commissioner Bettenker? And we've answered, I hope, all clarifying questions, unless are you about to turn on your mic? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay. And 3-2, the ayes have it. Motion approved. Thank you, everyone. Agenda item number 3, the board will discuss and vote on the recommendation from the Legislative Subcommittee on legislation submitted by other persons and entities to the General Assembly in 2024. And I think we will turn to you.
So as I
Madam
started saying earlier, thank you so much. The committee reviewed 25 bills to support, oppose, or have no position. And we voted to unanimously support 5 legislative bills. We voted unanimously to oppose 4 legislative bills and voted unanimously in no opposition with 8 legislative bills. There were 6 bills that were previously voted by the board, so those were reviewed. There was one, the legislative committee to support Bill S-2204, but stated that House Bill 7248 should mirror the same language. This was brought up to us by the local board of canvassers that while they are sort of twin bills, the language of one of them was not as the other, so we only supported one of the versions. And then one piece of legislation 2208 was similar to 2204 with minor changes. So based on that, as we did last year in the 2023 committee, I will make a motion to actually vote on to accept the recommendations for all of the bills that the committee voted to support, which are 5 legislative bills, unless any board members have any specific questions about some of those bills or any of the bills that we either decided to have no position on or to oppose.
I'm sorry, so are we voting to accept all of the recommendations of the legislative committee?
Correct.
Including supporting, opposing, and
Yes,
no
unless you
position?
want to specifically talk about one piece of legislation.
I do,
Or-
but
and-
I
No,
do,
you
but,
can, no,
I don't
absolutely.
think we need to, I mean, I could talk about it in general to the motion if you'd like, the entire motion.
That's
It's up
fine.
to-
Yeah, to be clear, I mean, don't want to kill me. We
No.
could go through each
Oh, no, I'm
one
not
if you
suggesting
wanted
that.
to.
That's-
Okay.
I just was clarifying.
But
what
I
the-
think, no, I think this is the time, right, to
Mhm.
be able to just ask questions to members of the subcommittee on any one bill that stands out to you.
I have a question.
Do we want to have a motion first, or?
Oh,
would you-
sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yes. I made a motion to support our recommendations.
I'll second.
In a
the motion.
second.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussions or questions?
I do. First, one question. I don't recall, I see the S-2101 says we had the full support of the entire board. I don't recall voting on that. Did we? When did we vote on that one? That's the one regarding the transmittal of 3-day.
21.
That was the board's bill. That I presented on January 23rd, and that's the only piece of legislation thus far. This is the first piece of up 2 that have been submitted to the General Assembly.
Okay. Sorry, I just don't recall that particular vote. My question, I guess, is on, and I don't know what the number is, I'm sure someone could tell me, is about same-day registration.
Same day voter registration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the number is.
Oh.
If that's actually been submitted and assigned a number yet.
Yes.
74.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
So, I don't really have any questions on it in per se. I've kind of done some research and
Mhm.
thought a lot about this one. And I appreciate everybody's efforts on this. I understand that underlying this is really an effort to try to make sure that people that are eligible to vote can register. I do have some concerns about it, and I just want to make it clear that I will not be voting to support, I will be voting no to support this motion, not because of everything else. Just so we know, in particular, I have concerns about this. And I just want to explain, where I'm coming from on this. First of all, I think everyone's already heard me. I asked questions at the last meeting regarding, I just think that it opens the door for more fraud because frankly, I know people will be coming in. I know they'll be showing ID. I know they'll be signing an affidavit. But in my experience in working in Cranston, the Board of Canvassers, frankly, the affidavit means almost nothing in a sense, not to the person signing it, but in the application of the regulation, because there were several cases along the way of my 9 years of working in Cranston Board of Canvassers that we referred to law enforcement, that nothing happened. In fact, I don't recall, maybe Miguel, with your many years of experience here, I don't recall a case ever of somebody being prosecuted in Rhode Island for voter fraud. And further, we've done things like, for example, we had a very high profile discussion about signatures last year. And so far, nothing has happened, frankly. I mean, I'm sure things are happening behind the scenes, but there's no public knowledge of, are people going to be prosecuted? Did someone do something wrong? Like, where is it? So my concern is that the affidavit process, in a sense, becomes meaningless in Rhode Island because of the way that we choose to do nothing about that. Now, granted, it's not this board's purview to do something about that. But I don't feel that I can support anything that's going to further exacerbate that situation and make it more opportunity for fraud. Now, there are a lot of really good reasons. I appreciate Mr. Marion's comments about the new citizens. In fact, I would fully support if we had a bill saying, let's modify much like Massachusetts, where new citizens could get around that 30-day registration period, because those are folks that are very engaged. Obviously, when they went through the entire arduous process to become a citizen of the United States, they're engaged. I'm happy to have them, carve out something special for them. And perhaps it's something we could look at the future, or maybe not, because this might pass and we won't have to worry about that. Just a couple of other things. 30 days may be a long time. I recognize that. So shortening it could certainly be a legitimate aim. But part of that 30 days, our election workers are working very hard to do a lot of things in the 30 days leading up to an election. One of them is making sure that the voter rolls are correct. So when we go to the polls, the right people are there. So there's an integrity issue there. I don't know how this is going to be implemented. So however we implement it, I'm not sure we can adequately train people. Maybe we would do it similarly to the presidential. It would have to be a centralized place where someone comes to do that last minute registration. But again, I think that there's a chance that, again, that's opening the opportunity for fraud, because if people are not adequately trained, or if we open that up, again, we don't know how it's going to be applied. And then just finally, I would just add, I'm very concerned about the things that we may be doing, that we keep disconnecting the electorate from the election process. So if I can get a mail ballot X number of days beforehand and never leave my house and vote, and we're doing these things that really are disconnecting the voter from the electoral process. In Rhode Island, clearly, both through statute and the Constitution, is established that an election is a public and community process. So if you look at the fact that we talk about, if you look at statute, for example, I could go to the polls, or any of us could, and we could sit there and we could literally say that person is not who they are. That's because it's a public process. It's a participatory event. And I think anything that we further do to do that separates us and actually has a very negative effect on the community. So I'll just leave it there, but I'm not opposing all of the things, and I appreciate all the work that the committee did, but I will be voting no. And I'll just leave you with one last thing. In actually looking at the issue with the new U.S. citizens, I came across just a list that the United States Naturalization Service, or whomever administers that process, they had a list of responsibilities for a U.S. citizen. So if you're considering citizenship, the first one is support and defend the Constitution, which most oaths have. The second one I thought was interesting, which is to stay informed on the issues affecting your community. I don't know how effectively a person could be fully informed if they're registering that day and voting a full ballot. I have concerns about that. And the founders of this country made it clear that a educated electorate, educated in terms of educated on the issues, educated on the candidates, are knowledgeable of those things, was something that was very important to the integrity of the republic. So that's where I'm coming from in this, but I appreciate you letting me talk for a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. if I
Yes, yes, sir.
may, would it be possible to amend our motion to support the recommendations of the subcommittee with the exception of House 7474, so Commissioner Jack Loney could vote in support if that's his wish, and then we could take a separate vote on that one, that way he can express his displeasure.
Yeah, no, I it's just no, I understand what you're saying, but in the absence of legal counsel, I'm struggling to know if we could, if I'm looking at you, Miguel, as you've been here, if that would cause a conflict too legally.
I appreciate that, but I think from a procedural perspective, it would just require the person who made the motion and seconded to remove that and then just make a new motion if that was the desire of the committee.
Okay. And then we could vote on this one separately. We could do that. Okay, would you be willing?
So do you want me to remove, you can remove your second?
I will.
Great. So if there's no second, we can make another motion.
Okay. Does someone wish to make another motion?
Do you want to make another motion? Do you want to make a separate motion so that you can vote on?
Sure. So I guess, I'm sorry, you said the number was,
74,
so I guess we'll make a
74?
motion to accept the recommendations of the legislative subcommittee with the exception of H 7474.
Correct.
And I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to accept the recommendations of the subcommittee with the exception of House 7474. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And then,
Great. So
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to support H 7474 for same-day voter registration.
I'll second that as well.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. The motion passes. Thank you.
Members of the board, there's one other bill that was not taken up by the subcommittee. It's legislation 2208, which the board at a previous meeting had not actually referred that to the subcommittee. It was actually referred to a future board meeting, so the subcommittee didn't take it up. It's from the Rhode Island Clerks Association. And you had asked at that meeting in January, you had asked legal counsel Ray McCarcio on his opinion on the definition of active and inactive voters, and he provided a memorandum to you, which you should have in front of you. But this bill is substantially similar to the, is it 7248, Nick? That
Yep,
it's,
7248,
so that is just the last piece of remaining legislation.
2204.
So the bill number is 2208, and it's just one change in the legislation, which is calculating the size of the precinct with using inactive voters, using active voters and not including inactives.
And it looks like suggestion is to change a sentence or add a sentence to the proposed legislation that's in the last paragraph.
And I did inform Nick Lima from the Cranston Board of Canvassers, the clerk, of the council's suggestion. He, correct me if I'm wrong, agreed with the language suggested for sub A for that particular piece of legislation.
Thank you. We wish to make a motion on this piece. It's,
So I'll make a motion to support S 2208 with the minor changes that have been recommended.
okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Not opposed, aye. The ayes have it. Anything else? That'll do it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Agenda item number 4, the board may vote to meet in executive session on a personnel matter pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42-46-5, subsection A, subsection 1. Do we have a motion to meet in executive session?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. And we will go.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. And hearing no other business, do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So, second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned at 4:42 PM.
Thank you.
Next meeting is what, March 3rd?